Another day, another U-turn from this Labour government. This time it's watering down key elements of their digital ID, which is rumbled on from the Blair years. The government has dropped plans requiring workers to sign up to its digital ID scheme in order to prove their right to work in the UK. By 2029, right-to-work checks will be done digitally, for example, by using biometric passports, but registering with the new digital ID programme will be optional. This marks a shift from last year when the government first announced the policy and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer told an audience, "You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that." Now, this has drawn praise from both the left and the right. Zoe Gardner tweeted, "The U-turn on mandatory digital ID was incredibly predictable. I very much doubt scrapping jury trials will survive either. Less positively, probs not votes at 16 either. If the far right oppose something, Starmer won't do it. Farage is already the Prime Minister, really." Rupert Lowe said, "We won. Starmer abandons plans for compulsory digital ID. This is a huge win. Well done to everyone who has been fighting from all political parties and none. A team effort. It proves that we can make progress when we come together to fight this appalling Labour government." Typically, from my eyes, it seems that the Labour government is looking at what's very unpopular in society and they're going, "Ooh, we'll do that." But when it comes to digital IDs, the first poll that we saw, actually an outright majority of people didn't actually oppose it. Of course, it was, a lot of people did oppose it, but an outright majority didn't oppose it. Yet after the communication from this government, the way they've handled it and the way they've said, well, basically, we're doing this to crack down on illegal immigration. They didn't even put a positive, if there is a positive case, they didn't try to put a positive case why digital IDs could be good. They decided to say, oh, we're going to crack down on illegal migration. Now, polls show that the majority of people oppose it. They are so bad at politicking that a policy that not that the majority of people oppose it, now oppose it. Kieran, what are your thoughts on yet another government climb down?
I think it is obviously an expression of a manifestation of a government and a political class, but particularly a government that has never stood for anything, has actually, worse than that, has made not standing for anything a badge of honor, has made it part of its kind of, has basically made currency out of, or tried to make currency out of, not standing for anything, being post-political, if you like, being technocratic, being managerial, and leaving politics out of the picture altogether. Now, could that succeed? Even theoretically? Why not? Theoretically, maybe. But the problem with it is that it failed signally to generate anything like an electoral coalition. It failed signally to generate anything like an electoral base. I was talking about this with Aaron Bastani a while ago, and he was sort of saying, there's good stuff. There's some good stuff hidden in the budget. It's not great. It's not a socialist budget, but there's stuff in there hidden that and Labour seems so bad at kind of championing the things that they've done well, let alone, trying to hide the things that they're being called out for. And I think my answer to him was something that's worth repeating now, which is that that's not just a comms strategy or a lack of comms strategy. That's part of it, maybe, but that's kind of a superficial part of it. I think the key problem with that, and that speaks to this as well, is that there are no outriders in British civil society among the electorate, because Labour failed to build an electoral coalition. It failed to back parts of the population over others. It failed to back, say, workers from these sectors or workers altogether, whatever. So it failed to build those kind of segmented electoral pacts. And as a result, all the usual suspects criticised Labour, criticised the Starmer government. That was always going to happen. This strategy of trying to endear yourself to your enemies, whether it's GB News, whether it's Reform voters, whether it's the Times and the Telegraph, it worked in election mode because Rishi Sunak and the Tories were so cataclysmically unpopular. It worked in election mode, but the problem is that there was absolutely nothing behind it that was going to step in after winning what was a record majority. And so seeing that record majority, 175 seats, vaporize in such a short space of time is absolutely, it's almost hypnotizing to watch it happen and to see how ineffective and incompetent they are in all sorts of ways. But all of this ineffectiveness and incompetence, Curtis, exists and operates within the context of a program without political strategy and without political vision and without political beliefs.
I think you're right there. In fact, we hear people who are still trying to stick to Starmer's politics. There's fewer and fewer as time goes on. Will say, "Hey, look, it's just a communication issue," and I think that misses the point. Communication is clearly terrible, but I think that comes with the territory of having no politics or no political project. Everything that's happened under this Labour government, I feel like the entirety of the left predicted. We said it was going to be what Jeremy Corbyn describes as a loveless landslide. We knew it was an anti-conservative vote, and that the failure for the Labour Party to build a coalition to sort of keep its support from the base, because they didn't really have a base, is that when push comes to shove, when there's going to be times in which the Labour Party or the Labour government is going to be unpopular, usually if you have a coalition, they're willing to defend you. Yeah. You think about Boris Johnson for a second. There are people out there, I mean, less populist now, but back then there were, I think, a sizable amount of people who were willing to stick with Boris Johnson despite making bad decisions. And the Labour Party used to rely on that, didn't they? They used to rely on the working class and the workers themselves. They may say, do you know what? They've made mistakes here, but they're the party of the workers and we need to defend that. But because they completely hollowed out their base, it was very easy for the cards to fall and no one would defend this Labour government. And I think the communication is a byproduct of the lack of political strategy and sort of political vision.
Yeah, I agree completely. And there are times as well, I mean, that's a truism, and I think it's true. I don't say that in a disparaging way. I think it's true in any era, but it's particularly true in some eras over others. And I do think that there is a yawning gap. There's a kind of void where a kind of visionary politics would be right now. And if it's coming from anywhere, unfortunately, even though it's predicated on lies and mythos, it's coming from the right. It's to the extent that it exists, which is a low extent, it's coming from Farage and his outriders. But there are certain times when structural conditions, economic conditions, bring to bear on social conditions in such a way that they open up a space for a much more visionary politics. And I do think, of course, we're the left. We always think that the time is nigh for that. But I do think that after COVID and with inflationary pressures that emerged from that, with the way in which massive wealth concentration became exponentially worse after COVID, and with the deterioration of public services in this country through austerity after the financial crisis and so on, the conditions were uniquely ripe for a more visionary politics. And by the way, I should say, I do think that Zach Polanski is to some extent so far filling that void as well. I don't just want to cede ground to the populist rat bag right. I do think that Zach Polanski is also doing a very good job of articulating a more visionary politics. Let's see where we go with it. But I think it's a very promising start. So yeah, I think Starmer's fucked himself, if I'm allowed to swear, on two fronts. It would be true in any political era that if you go into an election with no politics, but just by not being, sort of the inversion of the guys with the politics who have failed, and then continue that into power, you're going to fail anyway in any era. Call it the neoliberal call it the end of history or whatever you want. Obviously, that was all bullshit. Even in such an era, you're going to be punished your support will vanish because you don't have any real base. But it's, I think, particularly true at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's something that can be true of politics more broadly, but it's emphasized much more, and I think that's more realized in the era of populism, I think. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right.